A father throws his son out onto the street, but no one expected what the bear did next. The bitter Montana winter of 2023 howled through the Flathead Valley like a wounded animal, driving sheets of snow against the Mitchell family's two-story home. 17-year-old Jack Mitchell stood frozen on the front porch, his father's words still ringing in his ears. "If you can't follow my rules, then you're no son of mine." The porch light flickered once, then went dark, leaving him alone in the growing storm with nothing but a hastily packed duffel bag and his precious camera equipment. Inside the house, Robert Mitchell's hands trembled as he poured himself a glass of whiskey. The same hands that had built houses across 3 counties for the past 25 years, the same hands that had once cradled his newborn son, had just slammed the door on that very child. The familiar warmth of the alcohol did nothing to ease the cold knot in his stomach. On the mantel, Sarah's photograph seemed to watch him with disapproval, her artist's eyes carrying the same dreamy, distant look he'd begun to see in their sons. The argument had started at dinner, like so many others before it. But this time, Jack had crossed a line. Not only had he rejected the construction business that had put food on their table for 3 generations, but he'd gone behind his father's back to apply for some fancy photography program. The acceptance letter from National Geographic Young Photographers lay crumpled on the kitchen table, along with the plane ticket to Yellowstone National Park that Jack had bought with his diner wages. "You're throwing away everything I built for you," Robert had shouted, his voice breaking. "Everything your grandfather built. For what? To chase animals around with a camera like some tourist?" Jack had stood his ground, chin raised in that stubborn way that was so like his mother. "Mom always said we should follow our passions," he'd countered. "She didn't spend her life doing what everyone else wanted, and neither will I." The mention of Sarah had been the final straw. Robert's grief, still raw after 3 years, had exploded into rage. "Don't you dare use her to justify this. She's gone, Jack. Her art didn't save her, and your photography won't save you. The real world needs concrete and steel, not pretty pictures." Now as Robert stared into his whiskey glass, the sound of the wind reminded him of Sarah's last days in the hospital. She'd asked him to promise something. "Let him be who he is, Rob. Don't try to make him into you." He hadn't understood then, or maybe he hadn't wanted to. Outside, Jack trudged through deepening snow, each step taking him further from the only home he'd ever known. His mind wandered back to happier times, when his mother would take him on adventure walks through these same woods. She'd bring her sketchbook, and he'd bring the little point-and-shoot camera she'd given him for his 10th birthday. They'd spend hours documenting the changing seasons, Sarah teaching him about composition and light while they searched for the perfect subject. "Everything tells a story," she'd say, showing him how to look beyond the obvious. The way that branch bends, the pattern of moss on a rock, the tracks an animal leaves behind, they're all pieces of a bigger picture. You just have to learn how to read them. Those lessons had stuck with him, shaping his eye as a photographer. But they'd done something else too. They'd taught him to see the stories hidden in people, like the way his father's hands always smelled of sawdust and coffee, how his shoulders carried the weight of not just their family's legacy, but the responsibilities of every house he'd ever built. Jack understood the pressure, the expectations. He just couldn't live up to them. The nearest town, Whitefish, was 15 miles away, and the last bus had left hours ago. Jack's phone was dead, and most of his friends lived too far to reach in this weather. His only option was the old ranger station at the edge of the forest, about 2 miles up the road. He'd photographed it many times, the weathered wood and rusted metal telling stories of years of service to the wilderness. Now it would have to tell his story too. As he walked, memories flooded back. He remembered the day his mother was diagnosed, how the hospital corridors seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the words had fallen like hammer blows. Sarah had faced it with the same quiet grace she brought to her art, spending her final months completing a series of paintings she called Light in Dark Places. She'd sold them all at a gallery showing 2 weeks before she died, insisting the money be put aside for Jack's future. Art isn't just about beauty, she told him during one of their last conversations. It's about truth. Sometimes the hardest truths are the most important ones to capture. She'd squeezed his hand, her artist's fingers now thin and pale. Promise me you'll keep looking for those truths, Jackie. Promise me you'll tell the stories that need telling. A sudden gust of wind nearly knocked Jack off his feet, bringing him back to the present. The storm was getting worse, the temperature dropping rapidly. His fingers were already numb inside his gloves, and his camera bag felt like it was filled with lead. But he couldn't stop. Not here, not now. Back at the house, Robert Mitchell paced his living room like a caged animal. The whiskey bottle was empty now, but it hadn't helped. Sarah's voice kept echoing in his head, along with memories he'd tried to bury. The day Jack had won his first photography contest in 8th grade, beating out kids twice his age. The pride in Sarah's eyes when their son's photo had been printed in the local paper. The way Jack's face lit up when he talked about his latest project, just like Sarah's had when she discussed her paintings. Robert's eyes fell on a dusty cardboard box in the corner, one he hadn't opened since Sarah's death. Inside were her sketchbooks, dozens of them, filled with the moments of their life together. There was Jack as a baby, sleeping in his crib. Jack building his first birdhouse in Robert's workshop. Jack taking pictures at the county fair. Each drawing captured not just the scene, but the feeling behind it, the love, the joy, the sense of possibility. With trembling hands, Robert pulled out the last sketchbook, the one Sarah had filled during her hospital stays. He'd never been able to look at it before, but now something compelled him to open it. The pages were filled with sketches of their family. Jack showing her his photos, Robert falling asleep in the hospital chair, the three of them together in moments stolen between treatments. On the final page, Sarah had written a note. My dearest boys, remember that love isn't about holding on too tight. It's about giving each other room to grow, to become who we're meant to be. Rob, our son has my heart and your strength. Let him use both to find his own way. Jack, never stop seeing the beauty in the world, but don't forget to see it in the people closest to you too. You're both artists in your own ways. One builds with wood and steel, the other with light and shadow. The world needs both. All my love. Sarah. Robert's vision blurred as the reality of what he'd done hit him. He'd let his grief and fear drive away the one person he had left to love. Grabbing his truck keys, he rushed to the phone and dialed the local ranger station. Meanwhile, Jack had finally reached the abandoned ranger station. The old wooden building looked more decrepit than ever, with shutters hanging askew and patches of roof missing shingles. But it was shelter, and right now that was all that mattered. The door protested with rusty hinges as he pushed it open, revealing a dark interior thick with dust and memories. His flashlight beam revealed cobweb-covered furniture and an old pot-bellied stove in the corner. To his relief, there was still a small pile of firewood beside it. If he could get a fire going, he might survive the night without freezing. As he worked to start the fire, his mind drifted to the last time he'd been here, a summer afternoon when he'd photographed a family of foxes living under the station's foundation. His mother had been with him then, already sick but still smiling as she watched him work. It took several attempts with his lighter, but eventually, Jack managed to get a small fire started in the stove. The heat was minimal, but it was better than nothing. He spread his sleeping bag on the floor near the stove and tried to rest, but sleep proved elusive. The wind howled through gaps in the walls, and his mind kept replaying the argument with his father. Around midnight, the storm intensified. The old building groaned under the assault of the wind, and snow found its way through every crack and crevice. Jack huddled closer to the dying fire, adding the last of the wood. He was beginning to worry that he'd made a terrible mistake in coming here. Maybe he should have swallowed his pride and apologized to his father, agreed to give up photography and join the family business. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew he couldn't have done it. His mother's words came back to him. Sometimes the hardest truths are the most important ones to tell. The truth was, he wasn't meant for his father's world of blueprints and building permits. His art was different, not better or worse, just different. Like his mother's paintings, his photographs were about capturing moments of truth, revealing the stories that might otherwise go untold. The sound came just as he was finally drifting off, a low growl that made his blood run cold. Jack's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding. There, in the doorway, illuminated by the dying embers of the fire, stood a massive grizzly bear. It must have been drawn by the warmth of the fire or perhaps the smell of the granola bars in Jack's bag. Either way, it was blocking the only exit. Jack's mind raced through everything he knew about bear encounters. Don't run. Make yourself look big. Make noise. But in the confined space of the ranger station, none of that seemed like good advice. The bear was already inside, and there was nowhere to go. His camera bag was within reach, and inside it was the bear spray he always carried when photographing wildlife. But could he reach it in time? The bear took another step forward, and in the dim light, Jack could see its condition clearly. It was thin, far too thin for this time of year. It should have been hibernating, but something had obviously driven it from its den. The storm, perhaps, or lack of food. Its eyes, reflecting the dying firelight, held more desperation than aggression. In that moment, something clicked in Jack's mind. He was no longer just a scared teenager facing a predator. He was a wildlife photographer, face to face with one of nature's most magnificent creatures. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his camera bag. The bear watched but didn't advance. With trembling hands, Jack extracted his camera and raised it to his eye. The click of the shutter seemed impossibly loud in the quiet cabin. The bear's ears twitched, but it remained where it was, studying Jack with what almost seemed like curiosity. Jack took another photo, then another. The bear's presence filled the viewfinder, its scarred nose, its powerful shoulders, the frost-rimmed fur around its face. Despite his fear, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the creature's beauty. Then the bear did something unexpected. It lowered itself to the floor, still watching Jack, but in a less threatening posture. It was seeking shelter, just as he was. Two outcasts, thrown together by circumstance and storm. Jack's fear began to subside, replaced by a strange sense of kinship. As he photographed the bear, Jack remembered something his mother had told him about her art. The best paintings happen when you forget to be afraid, when you're so caught up in seeing that you forget about yourself. He understood that now. Through his lens, he wasn't seeing a dangerous predator, but a fellow creature trying to survive, just like him. The night passed in an odd sort of détente. The bear settled near the door, occasionally lifting its head to look at Jack, who remained by the stove, taking photos when he dared. The storm raged outside, but inside, an unlikely peace had been established. Jack even dared to toss one of his granola bars toward the bear, who accepted it with surprising gentleness. Meanwhile, Robert Mitchell was frantic. After calling the ranger station and learning about the bear sightings in the area, he'd insisted on joining the search party. Wildlife Service Rangers Tom Cooper and Maria Reyes had tried to discourage him, citing the dangerous conditions, but Robert wouldn't be deterred. "That's my son out there," he'd said, his voice breaking. "I did this. I have to make it right." As they drove through the storm in their heavy-duty trucks, Maria shared what they knew about the bear. It was a female, about 7 years old, who'd been forced from her usual territory by recent logging operations. She'd been spotted several times near town, raiding garbage bins and bird feeders, but hadn't shown any aggression toward humans. Sometimes, Maria explained, when animals lose their homes, they don't know where to go. They end up in places they'd normally avoid, just trying to survive. The words hit Robert like a physical blow, making him think of Jack, alone in the storm because of his father's stubbornness. As dawn approached, the storm began to ease. The first gray light of morning filtered through the windows of the ranger station, illuminating the strange scene within. The bear rose to its feet, shook itself, and with one final look at Jack, ambled out into the snow-covered world. Jack quickly grabbed his camera and followed at a safe distance, capturing shots of the bear against the pristine white landscape. It was while reviewing these photos on his camera's display that Jack heard the sound of vehicles approaching. 2 pickup trucks were making their way up the snow-covered road, one belonging to the Wildlife Service, the other to his father. Jack's heart lurched at the sight. Robert practically leaped from his truck before it had fully stopped, rushing toward Jack with a look of fear and relief that made him look 10 years older than he had the night before. "Jack! Thank God!" He wrapped his son in a fierce hug, something he hadn't done since Jack's mother died. When the storm hit, and I realized what I'd done, I've been searching all night with the rangers. I thought I'd lost you too. The Wildlife Service rangers approached more cautiously, their rifles at the ready. "We've been tracking that grizzly in the area," Maria explained. "She's been causing problems, raiding garbage bins in town. We think she might have a den nearby that was damaged in the recent logging operations. Have you seen any sign of her?" Jack hesitated, then held up his camera. "I've got something better than signs," he said. He showed them the photos from the night before, the bear in the doorway, the bear resting, the bear against the dawn sky. The ranger's eyes widened as they scrolled through the images. "These are remarkable," Tom said. "The detail, the composition, and to get this close." He looked at Jack with new respect. "Would you be willing to share these with our department? They could help us understand this bear's behavior, maybe find a better way to handle the situation than putting her down." Robert was staring at the photos too, but his expression was different. For the first time, he was seeing his son's photography through new eyes. These weren't just pretty pictures. They were powerful documents of life, death, and survival. They told stories that words couldn't capture. "I had no idea," he said softly. "When you talked about photography, I thought I didn't understand. But these photos, they're more than just pictures. They're like your mother's paintings. They show the soul of things." The mention of Sarah hung in the air between them. Robert pulled out her last sketchbook from inside his jacket. "I found this last night," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your mother, she knew who you were meant to be, even then. I was too blind to see it, too scared of losing the plans I'd made. But she was right, you have her eye for beauty, and my determination. You just used them differently than I expected." Over the next few months, things changed dramatically for both Jack and the bear. The Wildlife Service used Jack's photos as part of a successful campaign to establish a protected corridor for local wildlife, ensuring that future logging operations wouldn't disturb their habitats. The female bear, whom local children had nicknamed Hope, was fitted with a tracking collar and became something of a local celebrity as Jack continued to document her recovery. Jack's photos were featured in local newspapers and eventually caught the attention of several wildlife magazines. The story of his night in the ranger station with Hope became the centerpiece of a larger article about human-wildlife conflict and conservation. The National Geographic Young Photographers program not only accepted him but used his bear photographs in their promotional materials. His father, true to his word, helped Jack convert their old garage into a photography studio. While Jack still planned to attend the National Geographic program, he also started taking local photography jobs to build his portfolio. To everyone's surprise, Robert's construction business benefited as well. Jack's architectural photographs of his father's buildings brought in new clients who appreciated the artistry they saw in both the structures and their documentation. The following winter, Jack and his father stood together at the edge of the newly established wildlife corridor. Hope's tracking collar showed she had finally found a suitable den for hibernation, far from human settlements but close enough for Jack to occasionally photograph her from a safe distance. The bear had gained weight and seemed to be thriving in her protected habitat. "You know," Robert said, watching his son adjust his camera settings, "your mother would have loved this place." He gestured to the pristine landscape before them, unmarred by development thanks to the conservation effort Jack's photographs had helped create. "She always said that the best art changes things, changes how people see the world." Jack nodded, thinking of the series of photographs that now hung in the Whitefish Municipal Building. The images told the story of Hope's journey from desperate survivor to symbol of conservation success. But they told another story too, one of a father and son finding their way back to each other through understanding and acceptance. The Mitchell Construction Company had evolved as well. Robert had begun specializing in environmentally conscious building designs, with Jack's photographs showcasing how modern construction could coexist with nature. They'd even won an award for a series of vacation homes that incorporated wildlife corridors and used sustainable materials. "I've been thinking about what Mom wrote in her sketchbook," Jack said, lowering his camera, "about how we're both artists in our own ways. She was right. We just needed to find a way to bring those ways together." Robert smiled, remembering how Sarah had always seen connections where others saw only differences. "Speaking of bringing things together," he said, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket, "I've got something for you." Inside was a deed to a small piece of land adjacent to the wildlife corridor. "I thought maybe we could build you a proper studio here," Robert explained. "Something that fits with the landscape where you can work and teach those photography classes you've been talking about. We could design it together." Jack stared at the deed, emotion tightening his throat. The land overlooked Hope's new territory and offered perfect lighting conditions for photography. But more than that, it represented his father's complete acceptance of his chosen path. The studio took shape over the next 6 months, becoming a project that truly merged father and son's talents. Robert's expertise in construction combined with Jack's eye for natural light and composition created something unique, a building that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, with large windows and observation decks that allowed photographers to document wildlife without disturbing it. As they worked, they talked more than they had in years. Robert shared stories about his own father, the original founder of Mitchell Construction, and how he'd struggled to live up to the old man's expectations. Jack spoke about his dreams for the future, not just photographing wildlife, but teaching others to see the beauty and importance of the natural world. The day they finished the studio, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the trees, Hope, with 2 cubs following behind her. Jack quickly grabbed his camera while Robert watched in amazement. The bear that had once seemed so desperate and dangerous now moved with confidence, teaching her cubs to forage in their protected habitat. "Sometimes I think about that night in the ranger station," Jack said quietly as he photographed the family. "How 2 scared creatures found shelter together. If you hadn't thrown me out," he paused, considering. "If you hadn't thrown me out, none of this might have happened." Robert put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Your mother always said everything happens for a reason. I didn't believe her then, but I do now. That night, it broke something in both of us. But sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt better than before." The studio became known as Hope's Haven, hosting photography workshops and educational programs about wildlife conservation. Jack's original photographs of Hope hung in the main gallery, alongside Sarah's last paintings and architectural photos of the buildings Robert had created. It was a testament to how art, nature, and human endeavor could not just coexist, but strengthen each other. One evening, after a successful workshop, Jack found his father sitting on the observation deck, watching the sunset. Robert held one of Sarah's sketchbooks, open to a drawing of Jack as a young boy, camera in hand. "You know what I realized?" Robert said as Jack sat beside him. "That night when I threw you out, I was trying to protect you from what I thought was a hard life. The kind of life your mother had, always struggling to make art pay the bills. But I was wrong about what makes a life hard or easy." He closed the sketchbook gently. "The hardest life is one lived against your nature. Your mother understood that. She never made much money from her art, but she was happy. And now look at you. You found a way to make your art matter, to make it change things for the better. That's worth more than all the construction contracts in Montana." As if to emphasize his point, Hope and her cubs appeared in the distance, their shapes silhouetted against the setting sun. Jack raised his camera, capturing the moment. But this time, he wasn't just photographing bears. He was documenting a legacy of art, conservation, and family healing, all intertwined like the branches of the ancient trees that surrounded them. "Mom once told me that every photograph is really a self-portrait," Jack said, lowering his camera. "That we can only capture what we understand in our hearts." I never really knew what she meant until that night with Hope. "Sometimes you have to be lost to find yourself." Robert nodded, understanding at last. The bear had done more than just share shelter with his son that night. She had shown them both that the walls we build, whether out of fear, pride, or tradition, are often the very things that keep us from our truest paths. As darkness fell, father and son remained on the deck, sharing comfortable silence. Above them, stars began to appear, the same stars that had witnessed their separation on that cold winter night 2 years ago. But now they sat together, two artists in their own right, their different paths finally leading to the same destination, home.